Talk Radio. Your host, Joe Cristiano.
Welcome, everyone, to Liberty Talk Radio, America's libertarian voice, broadcasting from our studio in Tulsa, Oklahoma, to around the world. I'm your host, Joe Cristiano, and this is your antidote to popular talk radio. Today, we're absolutely honored to have Professor Laurence Kotlikoff as our guest. Mr. Kotlikoff is a Fairfield Warren professor and professor of economics at Boston University. He's also a New York Times best-selling author. He's an active columnist. He appears in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Financial Times, and many other publications. He was recently elected as one of the top 25 most influential economists. You know, I've been elected as one of the top 5 pains in the neck, but I never had any distinction like that. That's why I'm so honored to have him on the show. Well, at least my wife tells me that. Today we're here to discuss economic inequality. Hold on, did we just lose something?
Lose his picture.
Oh, well, I think we just lost your picture. How did we do that?
I no idea whatsoever. Just stopped.
He's back on? You're back on again. All right, there you are.
Well, I'm on, but I can't see you.
Can you see me now?
No, I just see. No, I don't see you at all.
All right, we lost him.
I just got a notice of internet problems.
I'm sorry?
I just got a notice of internet problems. So that could be it. We lost him. I don't know.
Can you get him back on the screen at least, and we can have a broadcast?
I don't get him back on.
No. Can he see me? Can you?
Yeah, I can't see you. Do you have? Maybe you should hit your video button.
All right. Now I see you, Larry. Can you see me?
Unfortunately, I cannot. No, I just see this this white box that says Liberty Talk with an eagle,
With the
but
eagle,
nothing.
yeah. That's all he sees is the eagle. The opening picture.
Do you want me to recall you or something, or?
Just hold 1 second. We're pushing a whole bunch of buttons and see which one works. We may hear an explosion. Was that? Is he on? My picture. I'm here. All right, but I'm not on Skype. Larry, you have any tranquilizers I can take? Maybe about 4 or 5 of them.
Really?
When this happens, I just go absolutely no. You have no idea. I get clinically depressed for 2 days when this happens.
Don't do
You
that.
got him?
Because
Okay, now how will we?
It's blame Bill Gates for this. This is all Microsoft's doing.
Let's blame good old Bill. All right, can you see me now?
Yes, I can.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Let me see. Can I see him? Is it possible for me to see him? Okay, there you are. If you can just get back just a slight bit, because there you go, like that, because I have only part of your face in the picture. Okay, well, I don't know how we'll have to edit this so we don't have all the gobbledygook that we've had, but we'll have to truncate it somehow. Well,
So we're taping. We're taping.
Excuse me?
You're taping it, right?
Yeah. So we'll edit the very first portion of it. I'll just introduce you again, folks. Today we're honored to have Professor Laurence Kotlikoff with us, and our conversation will center around economic security or insecurity or inequality, I should say, economic inequality, whatever that means. Okay, Larry, thank you so much for being on our program.
Great pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Well, you've been with our show a couple of times before, and I'm really pleased to have you back. The subject being economic inequality, but I'll bet that means something different to different people. Because every time I read that, there's a different angle on it, and depending on your status in life, you interpret it differently. When you say economic inequality, how do you define that?
Well, I define it as an economist would define it, which is we look at inequality in spending power. We don't, somebody could have all the money in the world, and then the government could take it all away and hand it out uniformly to everyone in the country. And that very, very, very rich person who has all the wealth in the world, all the assets, all the stocks, the bonds, the real estate, the yachts, he can't spend a penny because it's all been taken away. So we have to think about not wealth inequality by itself or inequality in labor income, which is also very unequal, but we have to think about where people stand after the government gets involved, because they take away resources from people in the form of taxes, and they give resources to people in the form of transfer payments. So when you take their resources, their wealth and their labor income, not just the current income, labor income, but the future labor income, we call that their human wealth. So you take their financial wealth and their real estate wealth and their human wealth, that's their total resources, and then you subtract their taxes net of any transfers they get. That's what their spending power is, and that's what they can go out and then spend. And so when you look at the inequality in spending, you look at the actual bottom line, which is how much do people get to consume? And that's what we really care about in economics, because we think that people's happiness depends on what they get to consume, not what comes to them. You know, they're not happy because they make $1 billion if the government takes away $1 billion. They care about what they actually get to eat and how many movies they get to see and all the other things, clothes, vacations. So we, in the study that I just did with an economist at Berkeley, Alan Auerbach, and an economist and a computer engineer at my company, which is called Economic Security Planning Inc. We have personal financial planning software. Anyway, we took, his name is Darrell Kohler, we took data from the federal government, from the Federal Reserve Board, called the Federal Reserve, the Survey of Consumer Finances. We ran it through our company's software. We incorporated all the taxes and transfer programs in the country, everything, the most comprehensive study ever done, took 3 years, to see what the distribution of inequality is, the distribution of spending power is. And we looked at 40-year-olds and 30-year-olds separately, and the different age groups separately, because it doesn't really make sense to compare an 80-year-old who's paid all his taxes over his life with a 30-year-old who's in the process of paying his taxes. So you want to look within a cohort, within an age group. And we looked at how inequality in wealth compares to inequality in spending power. So for the 40-year-olds, the top 1%, the richest 1%, if you line them up by their resources, which again is their wealth plus their human wealth, you rank them, from the households, from top to bottom. You take the top 1% of the total number of households, and you're using the population weights in the survey. You take that top 1%, you say, how much of the total wealth of everybody in that cohort do they own? It's about 20%. That's very unequal. There are only 1% of the people, of the households, they have 20% of the wealth. But then you ask, how much of the spending power do they have? It's around 9.5%. So the spending power, the spending inequality is about half of the wealth inequality if you're just focused on that percentile group. If you look at the bottom 20%, they have less than 2% of the wealth, but they get to do 7% of the spending. In other words, the bottom 20%, again, ranked from in terms of resources from top to bottom. You take the lowest 20% in terms of that ranking of those. They only have 20% of the total wealth, the net wealth, the financial assets and the real estate equity, but they get to do 7% of the spending. So we do have a very progressive tax system. Their tax rate, out of every dollar of resources, they're being subsidized, these lower 20%, poor 20%, their tax rate's about negative 34% on average. In other words, for every dollar of their resources, the government's handing them on net transfers that exceed taxes by about 34 cents on the dollar. For the top 1%, it's about 43% tax that's positive as an average tax rate. So we're going from negative 34% to positive 43%. We have a very progressive fiscal system. We still have a lot of inequality. You know, you still have the lowest 20% only getting to consume 7% of the total. If we had complete equality, they would get to spend 20%. So their share of the spending is only, they're 20% of the households, but their share of the spending is only 7% of the total. If you were to take the top 1% and take everything left that they've got of their spending power and give it to the bottom 20%, they would have about 16% of the total spending power. They still wouldn't be up to 20%, so we would not get to perfect equality. But of course, if you took so much from the top 1% as to leave them with nothing, they would leave the country and they would take their companies and the jobs with them.
Right.
So you can't. So you have to think about the incentives. The other thing in the study, and then I'll stop and let you talk, 'cause I know I'm talking a lot, but I think
No, please do. No,
it's important to get.
you're here. I invited you. And people
Yeah.
are tired of listening to me talk, let me tell you.
Oh,
You're making a lot of people very happy, by the way, Larry, right now.
Okay, well, I think it's important to understand what the baseline is
Yeah.
before we start talking about redistribution. Or if we talk about tax reform, are we happy with this degree of inequality? Do we want to make it less? Do we want to make it more? But we also want to think about the incentives for people to work and save. So this study looks at that too. And it turns out that almost everybody in the middle class and the lower income groups are facing a marginal tax rate on working an extra. In other words, they earn an extra $1,000. How much can they actually spend over the rest of their life? Turns out that it's about $600. So they're facing about a 40% marginal tax. So they get the $1,000, they pay taxes now, they pay like Ohio, sales taxes when they spend some money. But some of it they save and they have to pay more taxes in the future on that. So if you ask, out of the $1,000 in present value, how much do they actually get to spend over time? It's only $600, so they're a 40% marginal bracket. The top 1% are in about a 65% marginal bracket. So we have, because, if you think about it, we have about 40 different fiscal programs that have been set up without any coordination. We have food stamps, we've got Ohio, we did the study for, assuming people lived in Ohio, just to keep it simple. They have their own income tax, they have their own sales tax. We have a federal corporate tax, which reduces what you get in terms of return on your savings. We have personal income taxes, we've got 401k plans, we've got the alternative minimum tax, we've got the earned income tax credit, we've got the child tax credit, we've got taxation of Social Security benefits, we've got Medicare, special high income taxes, we've got Medicare Part B premiums. If you look at all these programs, there's about 40 of them. None of them are connected to each other, and none of them were designed comprehensively. So what happens then is that when you start earning money, you have to pay extra taxes or you start losing benefits. And this is where you get put everybody into high tax brackets because you haven't coordinated things. And so I think we can, by playing around with this new methodology that we have, come up with tax reform proposals that can retain the same degree of progressivity, but lower the marginal tax rate so that people have more incentive to work and to save.
Yeah. Now, when you refer to the lower 20% or 10%, whatever that bracket might be, those people that are on some sort of government assistance, is that considered income to them, or is that excluded in the formula?
The government, so we're ranking people based on their pre-government resources, and then we're saying, if the government gives them some money like Social Security benefits or Medicare benefits or Medicaid benefits or food stamps or welfare benefits, that's money coming to them that they get to spend. But if the government takes away money via taxes, that's money so we say, here's what they would have had without any government whatsoever. Here's what they're left with the government. And what we do is we assume in this program that they're trying to spend their spending power, allocate their spending power to have a smooth living standard through time, so that they're not just trying to spend it all today, because we're trying to figure out the taxes on their income from savings, right?
Right.
So we need to have a pattern of their spending in order to figure all that out. So the software, which is called Economic Security Planner, which we market at esplanner.com, is a lifetime financial planning software program which helps people figure out how much to spend over time so that they have the same living standard through time per person. So I realize that this is a story of research which is got a lot of parts to it. You got the data, you've got different resources, wealth, you've got labor income, you've got the taxes, you've got the transfer payments, all that stuff, and then you've got time. And then you've got people living in an age group. Right now we got the 40-year-olds. for example, and you're trying to look at inequality within the 40-year-old group. And what I'm trying to say is that we don't get to consume our resources. It's only what we get to consume is our resources after the government's started, taken from us or given to us. And so that's really what we need to focus on. And these studies that have been done by economists that have gotten a lot of attention haven't really focused on the government's policy. So they've said we have massive amounts of inequality and wealth, but they haven't realized that the government redistributes, right? So it's just obvious that you'd want to incorporate that. We have a lot of let me put it this way. If you did a study of inequality and you just focused on the Medicaid program, you'd think that this country was the most progressive country in the world.
Right.
Because the rich have no Medicaid benefits and the poor get all the benefits. That's just as bad as studying just wealth inequality, because wealth inequality is just one component of the bottom line, which is spending inequality.
Yeah. Prior to the Depression in the 1930s, where people considered income earned income, in other words, money that they earned by producing something, by working. We think that definition has been lost. Now we're talking about income, but that income could include all sorts of government-supported programs. And I guess what confounds me is the fact that when people say, well, the rich are earning so much and the poor are earning so much, are we actually comparing apples with apples? Should we not be talking about just earned income versus subsidized income? And do you separate that in your studies?
This study is comparing apples to apples. This study is making everything clear. It's on my website, which is kotlikoff.net, KOTLIKOFF.net. And if you look at under articles, if you go to that website and you click on articles, it's the top article. It's about U.S. inequality, fiscal progressivity, and work and marginal incentives, something like the title like that. So you'll see if you read the study, it's not that complicated even for a non-economist to follow. That because there's a little bit of math, but it's very simple. That this is apples to apples. I mean, we're trying to say if somebody has a lot of Medicaid benefits, it doesn't mean they're, we want to incorporate all their. First of all, we want to leave the government out. We want to see what they've got in terms of their own labor income and what their own wealth is.
Okay, so it's labor versus labor. It's not labor versus government subsidies.
Well, no, you start with the first point is, what do they have if there was no government? It would be their net wealth. You own a house, you own some stocks, you have some bonds. That's your net wealth, okay? The equity in your home plus these other financial assets. And then you have some labor income coming in now and in the future. And that has a value in the present, which is we call present value. That's what we call your human wealth.
Right.
So that's where you are. You'd get to consume that over time if there was no government. But now add the government to the picture. How much does the government leave you with? That's basically what we're trying to study. And what they leave you with is your spending power, is the resources you can then allocate through time. And we make an assumption in order to figure out how much they leave you with about how you like to spend your money through time. Because how much they leave you with depends on that behavior. Okay?
Now, when I guess times have changed. I was brought up in a household. It was an immigrant household, and money was spent very sparsely. I remember my mother going to. I lived in Harlem, New York, in a tough neighborhood, and I recall distinctly my mother going shopping, to actual shopping, going to a Macy's, for example. She went to Macy's and Bloomingdale's downtown twice a year. Today, people are shopping every weekend. I know so many people who are, in fact, most people that I know, seem to have a decent income, but their debt burden is unconscionable. And I'm still of this old school that doesn't exist anymore, by the way, whereby when I was making $362.50 a month as a sales promotion and advertising coordinator for AMC stores working at 1440 Broadway, I mean, high dollar stuff, I still put money away. I mean, I wouldn't dare spend any money. But it seems that we talk about economic inequality, but we don't talk about the behavior of the person and how that contributes to their station, where they fall. People would, there's there's an ad on TV just the other day. It said, want to buy a new car? No problem. No money? No problem. No payments now for 2 years, before, the car will be totally depreciated before they make their first payment. And this is the mindset that it keeps on eroding into people's wealth. But I'm sorry for the blah, blah, but,
I think
it confuses the hell out of me.
It's important. When you look at 40-year-olds, you're looking at their wealth, and that reflects their behavior. How much should they save? There's a lot of things going on as to how much you end up with when you're 40 in terms of your net wealth and whether you have a house. And that part of that is, how much the government took away from you along the way, but also, or gave to you, but also how much you saved versus spent. So we're kind of looking at things at a kind of point in time and saying, all right, given that behavior, how much remaining lifetime spending inequality is there? Let's forget how, it could be that the poor people are poor, that the lower 20% are poor because it was their choice. Okay, so we're neutral about how to read these numbers. We're just saying, if you rank people from poor to rich based on their resources, and then you ask, what is the government doing for the rest of their life, not in the past, but in the future, in terms of letting them spend it or taking it away or adding to it, what's the picture? And that's the picture. So I think the bottom line of the study is that we have much less inequality than people think, but we still have a lot of inequality, and that we have much more progressivity in our fiscal system than people think.
Right.
But it's not as progressive perhaps as Sweden. And then the third thing is that we have very high work disincentives that people are facing no matter what their resources are. And the other last point about the study is that you have huge differences in people's work disincentives. So you have poor people that are in like 90% brackets or even higher, even above 100%, because they earn extra money, they lose their Medicaid benefits. You have a lot of states still that have not integrated with Obamacare, so if you earn an extra dollar or two, you can lose tens of thousands of dollars in Medicaid benefits for your family, for you and your family. So that becomes an astronomical marginal tax. You don't want to earn that extra dollar. For some other people, they could be actually facing negative marginal taxes because they're in a situation where they might have a lot of children. They earn more money because of the earned income tax credit, where the range that their salary is in, they earn extra money. They actually get subsidized for working. So there's this enormous spread in these marginal tax rates. That's exactly the opposite of what economics says to do. We don't want to kind of randomly encourage you to work and randomly discourage somebody very much just like you not to work, and give you like a huge subsidy for working and this other person a huge tax for working. That's what we call crazy. So this is the first real picture of our fiscal system, the first real picture of U.S. inequality. It's a very major study. You're the first show I've actually talked to about this study. It was cited the New Republic magazine and an online magazine called The Conversation. I did an op-ed that's also with Alan Auerbach, which is on the website, describing the study, and they carried it. And the New York Times, one of the columnists referenced it, but the study's been out for about a month with the National Bureau of Economic Research. And nobody in the press has really made anything of it to talk, to be realistic or honest. Now, here you have this guy, Piketty, who wrote this book about wealth inequality, a very thick book. It was an enormous thing. It hit the bookstores, Amazon, became a bestseller instantly, and it was a international phenomenon for over a year. People were saying, and it was all focused on wealth inequality. And I went to debate Piketty last October, a year ago, in Korea, when the book came out. And I said, look, well, you're leaving out a good part of the picture. You can't just study, if you're trying to understand how much somebody gets to eat, you wouldn't want to just study their consumption of potato chips, right? You'd want to do a comprehensive story, look at everything they get to eat. And he wasn't too happy. We did the study. It contradicts him in large part. Nobody's paying any attention. That's the nature of PR in this country.
Yeah. The death of people of incentive is enabling. And whenever you enable people, it's been my experience that you destroy people's incentive. When you destroy people's incentive, you are less productive, you are less wealthy. Many billionaires today never graduated high school. And I won't cite them because I know some of them. And I mean, not personally, but I know of them. And
right.
And what they did is they took their handicap, they overcame their handicap, and they worked. You take, I like to watch that program Shark Tank every once in a while, and Mark Cuban talks about he had no money at all, and he went door to door. Anything he can get his hands on, he would try to sell door to door, and now he's a multi-billionaire today, probably one of the most richest men in the world, and yet. So he didn't come from a rich family. He started with nothing. So, but yet he's, for those people who are on the lower end of the income scale, they vilify people like him, not him personally, but people like him because he has all this wealth. And my response is that, well, you can do the same thing he can do. Aren't we talking about human behavior when we talk about economic inequality? And I'll give you a very quick.
No, I don't think it's that simple, because if you're a low-income household and you go out and get a second job and you end up with less money than you started, you're locked into poverty. So it's not human behavior by itself. It's that's certainly partly involved. But if the government is involved in confiscatory taxes, which it is with many people, we have basically trapped a lot of poor people into poverty, and you can't become Mark, what's his last name? He's the head of the
Mark Cuban.
He owns the Dallas Mavericks, right?
Yes, right.
Well, he wasn't in that boat. He didn't have. Maybe he made some other life decisions that kept him out of that boat, but maybe he would have had a different boat had he, for example, impregnated somebody at 19.
Right.
Okay, then he's on a situation where he can't afford health care, so he's on Medicaid.
Right.
And then they tell him if he earns too much money on his or sales, whatever, he's going to lose all his Medicaid. We need to understand what the government's engagement is here and involvement. And then we also have to, encourage people to be thrifty and work hard, because life is not easy. You have to make your own way through life. And the government is not, what I see is the government locking so many people into poverty, and through this entirely, bureaucratic, inefficient system where one bureaucrat is trying to make a life for himself by making the rules as complicated as possible so he can be an important person in that world and get to administer a program. Another bureaucrat's got another program. So when you have 40 of these programs with whole armies of bureaucrats running them and not looking at the big picture, you end up with what we have in the US, which is a mess. It's just a complete fiscal, So I'm just talking about, we have achieved some good things, which is reduction in inequality, but we've done it at this very high price of locking a lot of people into poverty and very inefficiently. And then we also have a long-term fiscal problem involving not being able to pay our bills through time.
Right.
The country's basically broke to an enormous degree, and that's the intergenerational inequality, the inequality between current adults and future generations to whom we're leaving all these bills for Medicare, Medicaid, the defense budget, all this spending the federal government is not paying for with current taxes. And I'm not just talking about the official debt, I'm talking about when we take some taxes or we take money from young people and call it taxes, give it to old people as old age benefits, Social Security, Medicare, healthcare, Medicaid benefits, but
Internet problems.
Oh, jeez. Larry, are you there? We had an internet interruption here. Larry, are you still there?
I lost you.
There you are. Wait, we got you back again. Okay, I'm
I
sorry.
don't know if for some reason my Skype video keeps going off. Anyway, I'm going to have to close this off in a second, but so I have to get to another meeting. But I can't see you at this point either.
Oh boy. Okay. All right. Well, we'll just keep. Oh, there I am. Can you see me now?
Not yet.
Okay, it's okay. Well, let's just keep Larry on. Forget about me altogether. Okay. All right. Put Larry back on.
Let's
Okay.
say that,
Put Larry back on. Okay. Larry, I guess I'm just of such an old school. If you ever come to my neighborhood, you don't need my address. All you have to do is drive around, look for the oldest car. That's my house, okay? But see, I come from a different world, and I wonder if you of all the presidential candidates out there, and they're all they all want to make everyone rich without working. It seems they all have their own programs, and I think people need to have their own programs. I had my own program when 30 years. Some odd years ago when I got laid off because they closed the company closed down and they moved out. I was eligible for a significant amount of unemployment insurance, and I drove by the unemployment insurance office and I looked at it, saw people online. I said, I can't do that, and I just started my own business. I just drove by. I never collected a dime. And I was entitled for a year or two of unemployment, and I collected not a dime. But I mean, that's why I have such a difficult time discussing this, because I'm not of this. I guess I'm not of this world, of this current world that we live in, and I see things through a prism that doesn't exist anymore.
Well, I hear what you're saying, and I'm pretty much of that same generation, so we're not haven't had that much of a difference in experience, but. So we have to teach people the value of savings, the importance of self-reliance. That's very important. But we also have kind of told them systematically that we've educated an entire generation that the government was going to take care of them, and they were going to save enough for them for through Social Security and take care of their old age health care needs, and that their employer was going to take care of them. And what we've found out is that the government hasn't done nearly enough, and the employers haven't done nearly enough, and that people were actually, I think, really conned into thinking that they didn't have to do anything on their own. Now, that's a different world than you grow up in, because your parents, when your parents were around, the government was not such a big deal.
Right, exactly.
And employer-based benefits were not such a big deal. But what we saw in the starting in the 80s is that the employers started reneging on their promises of defined benefit pensions. So they started, starting with IBM, they were actually engaged in a real swindle of workers, because they had promised workers these very large pensions for working at lower wages. And then from one day to the next, they said, "Oops, we're going to shut down that program. We're going to freeze it, and now we're going to put you into a 401k plan."
Right.
And they didn't really fully reveal how much lower the living standard of people would be in old age. So it was a swindle. You get people to work on the promise of very rapid accrual of their pension benefits in their 40s and 50s and 60s, early 60s, and then you, in effect, take it away from them. And all of corporate America followed suit. So there's very few active defined benefit plans. So that's just an example of kind of a bait and switch that corporate America has pulled on the public, on the workers. So there's a lot of stuff going on here, but I hear you and I agree with you that we're not having a lot of conversations about saving and about self-reliance, about working. We're having a lot of conversations at the political level about how much the government can do for you or how much the government's not doing for you.
That's my problem, right. The Libertarian candidates, though, are talking about dismantling the whole thing, which I'm in agreement with. But of the Republicans and Democrats, is there any one that you favor relative to what we are talking about only?
Well, I think in a few months you'll see another option. We'll just leave it at that.
Oh, boy. All right. Then can we have you back on the program in 3 months or so we can discuss that, whatever it is?
Sure.
Okay. All right, Larry. Thank you so much for being on our program today. I apologize sincerely for all the technical problems we had. And folks, this is Professor Laurence Kotlikoff of the University of Boston, where we're talking about economic inequality. We'll have him back in about 2 or 3 months or so, and he'll be telling us this little secret that he has stored up for us, and maybe we'll learn some more. Larry, thank you so much for being on our program.
My pleasure.
Right. Bye-bye now.
Bye.
Folks, this is the end of today's program. We'd like to thank our sponsors for the financial support, and we'd like to thank you for listening in. You can further the cause of liberty by recommending this program to your friends and let us hear from you. Our email address is comments@libertytalkradio.com. Remember, as my wife would say, you are either allowing your liberties to be taken away or you're striving to protect them. Unfortunately, there is no middle ground. Until next time, this is Joe Cristiano. You've been listening to Liberty Talk Radio. Stay well. Stay tuned.